Hi everybody and welcome to our third episode of our Lead Strong series. I'm delighted today to be joined by my co-host Stephanie Hopper, who will introduce herself shortly, as well as our two wonderful guests. At Catfinity, we have a 16-year track record in supporting organisations to assess and develop their candidates and talents, and we're market leaders in the strengths-based approach. Stephanie and I are very passionate about leadership. We also work on our leadership proposition Altitude, which is a market leading way of assessing and developing your leaders in a strengths-based way.
Thanks, Celine. Really delighted to be here for episode number 3. Two fabulous guests, and today we're going to be talking about relationship navigation, and it's such a big key topic, isn't it? And so critical for leaders to think about how to build strong relationships, but really interesting after the last year when we reflect on how it is that we've kept connected. And when I was thinking about today, I thought, I know that I had to put in a lot of extra effort to keep that connection, maybe with stakeholders as well as my team. But actually this year, because of a lot of the work we're doing, I've reconnected with a lot of my external network, which has been super easy to do because of the way the world is now actually working so much more easily virtually. But let's start with introductions. Sarah, let's go to you first.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Sarah Gallo. I'm a HR director currently for News UK. I'm embarrassed to say I have about 20 years or so HR experience, mostly in consumer goods retail space, so ex-Tesco, and really, really excited to be here and done lots of work with CAP. So really happy to be with them today.
My name is Simonne LeBlanc. I'm currently residing in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And I have a history of spending a majority of my 27-ish plus years of experience. I'm not quite ready to say 30 in HR, really in building businesses, and now focusing on advising and coaching fintech smart startups to grow and scale globally.
Thank you, ladies. As I say, it is wonderful to have you with us today. And as Steph said, we've been talking a lot about relationship navigation. It's one of the strengths in our leadership model, but I think the pandemic has really brought that into focus. And we've got two key areas that we wanted to talk about today. I was doing a bit of reading earlier on today, just in preparation for this session, and there was a really interesting article published in the Harvard Business Review in March. And they were talking about social capital, which is essentially the benefits you get from people that you know. So it's, when you hit a problem at work or you're trying to find a solution, that feeling or that activity of picking up the phone and contacting someone and someone snooping in, that's you drawing on your social capital. And what the research was saying was that the informal interactions that you have with people are really important for that social capital, and that's how you build it. But what we've seen over the pandemic is that actually our networks have got smaller. So the research saying that what they've seen is that people are have been focusing on one or, they're very close knit group of people that they've got long-standing relationships with, and the weaker relationships have fallen by the wayside. And our meetings have gone up by 50%, and the messages we're sending to people in chat functions has also gone up by 40%, but it's in this much more narrow way. So it was just really interesting for me when I was reading that, this kind of dichotomy between being remote and spending more time on a laptop or on a phone and trying to keep connection. And I think as we move out of this, and I know we're doing this to varying degrees in the world, but in the UK specifically, starting to move towards hybrid, it's thinking about what lessons can we take forward from this remote kind of working experience. So I wondered if perhaps that's where we could start the conversation, is really looking at that transition out of the pandemic. And for you in the work that you do and the organisations and the clients you work with, what lessons do you think we could take forward, as we move forward? Sarah, I'll follow the trend. I'll go to you first. What do you think?
So, I agree. Loads has been actually somewhat easier with sort of very much, but with everyone being equitably working remotely. So when we're all remote, it's really easy to connect. We're using I certainly am using technology much better than I ever did when I worked remotely before. So video chats, Zooms, Hangouts, whatever they might be. So, and I think that's something we should do more of as we go forward. So gone are the days when I might have been the only one working from home and suddenly I wasn't included in the meeting, or I was dialed in and everyone forgot I was there, or, so I think that has been a real plus for me. I also have actually noticed that some of the people who are perhaps more private in their natural style, or perhaps a little bit more introverted, I've actually been able to get to know them at a much deeper level because I'm in their space. So, I can comment, Celine, on your fab background, and you and I might have a conversation about your family, or, that's been really good, I think, to break down some barriers with those that perhaps wouldn't normally be maybe so communicative about their kind of out of work lives. So I think there's lots of good to be taken. But I do think that there is that real challenge around that kind of, I like the social capital terminology. I thought about that kind of emotional loyalty or connection. For me, I think what maybe could we be doing differently as we go into a more hybrid way of working. I think it's really been quite planful about what work can you do best in a remote environment. That might be, meetings with people you're really well connected with, large group meetings where technology facilitates big groups coming together. But when you're in the workplace, thinking about keeping your diary a little bit more free to kind of perhaps invest in that kind of incidental conversations around the water cooler, that connections with people you've never met before, or just those kind of everyday conversations that build that sort of social capital. So that you're really using not just you're using the place you're in to its best effect, as well as the work you're doing in these places.
No, I agree, and I wonder if there's some lessons to be learned from industries who have already adopted this kind of style of hybrid working. So I think Steph and I have spoken before about consultancy, and actually in most of our careers we have had a combination of working in an office and remotely, and I was reflecting the other day about how full on work feels at the moment, and remembering that when I used to work from home and in the office, it was for the meetings. I'd keep my day clear so that I'd be able to have those water cooler chats. And maybe it's something around kind of taking lessons from organisations that have already done that, perhaps.
I think so, and I think just taking the time to just chat with people, right, in a less formal way.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Simonne, how about you?
I think, with the pandemic, I think what it has done is that has forced people, and force might be a strong word, but I think for those that it doesn't come naturally, I think there's more appetite for being flexible and empathetic for people and what's going on in their home life, because their life is now in the meeting rooms, right? Literally and physically. You see children, you see pets, you see spouses, you hear funny stories about, you're hearing your kids losing their mind in the other room, and you're just trying to pretend that it's not happening during a meeting. Even getting ready. Well, not even just getting ready for this morning. I've got a 6-month-old puppy who decided today's the day to break into a new ball and start chewing it and ripping it apart. And normally I would stress out, and partly I thought, well, as long as she's not ingesting it, this is a good way for her to be busy and quiet for the next 45 minutes. So bad parenting, but good meeting structure. But I think it allows for people, quite frankly, to have that different level of, everyone that comes to work has a life. And I think that when we were all in the office in the past, you forgot that, people checked their home life at the door and they were there to work. And I think there was an element of your success was driven by that. And I think this is a really positive if we can embrace it as a society, that we're actually engaging with people in a fundamentally different way. And that we on a global level, I work on a global scale. And so when I'm talking to people, whether they're in Spain, Estonia, Mexico, Brazil, everyone is going through the pandemic. When was the last time ever that we would talk about something so impactful And so there's an element of our ability to engage and to embrace. And I think the other thing, as I coach and counsel organizations on the return to work concept, is I feel like a lot of senior management and execs are stressing about what is this hybrid model going to look like? How's it going to work from a business perspective, from a people perspective? And I always just say, ask your people. Don't do it in a vacuum. Don't take that stress upon yourself to just get it right. You know what your business needs, but you're only going to know what your people need if you simply ask the question. So engage them, have them be a part of the solution, and don't try and make sure that it's perfect across the board. I think from I was reading actually up on Harvard Business Review has had some brilliant articles of late, and there's more and more this notion and this talk around the talk track, not just work from home, it's actually work from anywhere. And that's also part of a dialogue that companies are having. And then how do you embrace that, and how do you engage that in making sure that people still have that level of connection? And so the way to navigate, I think, through some of that is, and when I have some of my meetings with folks, we don't do a video call, we'll do a walk. I say, how do you feel about going for a walk this afternoon, and let's do it together. And so we're not on video where we can be, we'll pop on a video to see something that's in our environment. But we get the physical aspect, you're outside. It's no different than I would have done it in the office before, where you have a one-on-one and you go for a walk to get fresh air. So just do it together, even though you might be in different cities, different countries, different parts of the city. It's still okay to do that. So just be creative on how you really connect and make sure you continue to entrench those relationships.
Yeah, no, lovely. And the global piece is really interesting, isn't it? I read another interesting article last week that was looking at the impact of friendship on the kind of remote and hybrid working, and there's a piece of research done 2 years ago where 30% of people asked said that they worked with their best friend, essentially, that their best friend was in the office with them. And I'm really interested to see the next iteration of that research, to see what's the impact on friendships. And even though in an office you would go from one meeting to the other, actually the effects of sitting opposite someone who you physically see every day and the impact on friendship, I'd love to see how that kind of evolves, because I think that's really interesting as well, isn't it? Thank you, ladies. Super interesting. Thanks.
You're going to say something, Sarah?
I was trying to get my mute to work. Typical. Working problem. Somebody has to do it. I think that emotional loyalty, actually, and slightly off topic, but is maybe one to revisit or think about, particularly as leaders. Emotional loyalty and connection to an organisation is often about the people within it, and the way we've worked for the last year is obviously being different, but it's a period in time. But if we move to a more, countrywide hybrid way of working, how do you kind of create that environment of emotional loyalty that does tie a lot of people to a business? It will, I'm also interested to see the impact that has on retention, actually, I think, because so much of what you associate with the business you work with is the people within it. Most people say, the hardest decision when leaving was leaving the people. And the reason I say is the people. So that will be a really interesting one to watch.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think another lens on that, Sarah, is also creating a culture virtually, which we've never had to do that 100% of the time. And now we know that in most organisations, we're going to have a lot of employees who are working flexibly and virtually a lot more of the time. So the logo on the wall in the office, you don't see that every day anymore. So it's fascinating, really fascinating. All right.
Yeah. I think technology will really help with it.
Yeah, good point. So we often talk about, I guess, sort of political sharpness, being able to navigate complex stakeholder maps, play the political game in order to influence and be successful. And we talk about the importance of that for leaders, but we also talk about, the importance of being authentic and being the sort of person that other people can trust. I'm just wondering, what your thoughts are, both of you, on that tension, because for me there's a tension between the two of them. Let's go to Simonne first of all this time.
Thanks, Steph. Stephanie and I worked together for many years, several years ago, and she knows how I feel about sort of politics. I hate it within an organization. I'm pretty quick to sniff it out, and I try and snuff it out, to be honest, because I feel it is damaging and becomes toxic to an organization. Having said that, there's definitely an element of being politically savvy, and that's the ability to get things done. And that's where when I coach people or I speak to businesses, it's around the politics element should not just be around self-importance and self-ambition and improvement from getting to the next level. The being politically savvy is about getting things done in an organization. And so having that level of authenticity and transparency and truly being collaborative. And my last organization I worked with, I had the great fortune of working with 3 co-founders who fundamentally got what this truly meant, and further honed my skills in being authentic and being able to collaborate and being transparent. And when I speak about transparency and that real authenticity as a leader, it is around when you say to people in your organization, we really want to know how you're feeling, you have to be prepared for the bad answers. You have to be prepared for those hard questions. And it's one thing to say, we want to hear from you, ask us the questions. But the moment when they're asked in a group forum and there's that level of discomfort where everyone feels it and they feel like, oh, I'm never going to be that person who asked that question. What you need to do is applaud it and embrace it and thank them for asking the hard question. And to be honest, I think, the way to really kickstart that from a culture perspective and that you're trying to teach an organization, you don't have to be political in order to navigate through this organization. It is around being transparent and authentic, as I've typically kicked off the question period for town halls. And I know the 1 or 2 real sticky wickets. I know the ones that are going to make everybody cringe in their seats, and I start there. I just put it out there. And then I look at one of my peers and say, okay, that's for you. How do you, can you answer that for us now? And everyone's just sort of relieved. They're a little bit in shock, but you're setting the tone for the organization that we need to know what's on your mind. I'm not a mind reader. I want to know what's happening. And I'll be honest with you. If I don't know the answer, I'll say I don't know the answer. If I have an answer and I know that you're not going to love it, I'm still going to give you the answer. And we're going to work through that. So I struggle with where politics, I think, comes from is where there's that environment of people feeling there's that nuance where they have to cover themselves. They have to CYA because if they don't, something bad's going to happen. That power is in information, and that is the antithesis of being collaborative, where they feel if I just hold on to this and I come in the 11th hour with the hero, with that information, then good things are going to happen. You almost need to create an organization. When that happens, you kind of say, how long did you have that information for? Because why didn't you feel the need to share that with us earlier? We all need to chew on that and digest it and work together. So I do struggle with sort of politics in an organization. I do think you can move it away, and when you see it and when you can adjust it, and it becomes with an encouragement that nothing bad is going to happen to you if you ask the hard question. Nothing as bad is going to happen to you if you challenge leadership. If you say, guys, I think we've got this wrong. Great, thank you. Let's have that conversation. Let's understand what we're missing, because we're not in the trenches. Executive leadership typically are not in the trenches. Your people are the ones who are eat, sleeping, and breathing this in a fundamentally different way. So do yourself a favor and open up those channels and those lines of communication and let them give you the gift of information and feedback to be able to work with that.
Embrace the hard questions. I love it. I wouldn't have expected anything less, Simonne. Sarah, what are your thoughts?
So I really struggle with the term politics. Also, I don't like it in business, but for me, I think I try and flip it a bit. It's a bit like the word networking has always been a cringy word for me. That's just connection and conversation. And politics is a bit similar. I think for me, I try and think less about being political, more about just being strategic, thoughtful and smart in your approach. So I think it's almost the word helps to reframe it, or rewording it helps to reframe it. You know, it isn't about, as Simonne said, it shouldn't be about self-interest, self-promotion. It should be about thinking around strategically, how are you going to achieve the goal, the outcome, the conversation, facilitate the difficult question, whatever it might be. It's just thinking strategically around it rather than trying to be political. I think the politicians have ruined that word a bit for us, haven't they? So for me, I think it's that, and I think we do it all the time as well. It's not something that, for me, we are strategic or political in every aspect of our life. You know, think about arranging Christmas dinner with your family. Who's going to what mum, what dad, you know, what we're getting mum for Christmas. All of those things you think about, don't you? So before I ring my sister, I think, right, I know what outcome I want. So how am I going to pitch this to her so that she hopefully comes on that journey with me and we get to a point of agreement? That's being political, yes. Or in my mind, that's just being strategic and thoughtful to get the outcome that I think is right, or that I'm desiring, or that feels like will get us to where we need to be. So I think just reframing it is really important, and finding a way to do that in a style that's authentic to you, but suits the environment in which you're playing your part.
Absolutely, yeah, I really agree with that, and that the idea that we do it in a way that works for us, and that is comfortable and natural for us. I mean, I guess both of you must have seen examples of where this sort of political sharpness can be overplayed. What would you say the impact is of that, and what can happen, I guess, when that is overplayed? What would you say, Simonne, there?
Well, when I've seen it, and I think, quite frankly, I mean, I'm not any more special than most people, and if I can detect it, I think most people can see it when it is in that heightened state of somebody who operates in a really political manner. And what they actually end up doing is it becomes a little bit, for them, they actually create a vacuum or cocoon where people actually don't want to engage them because there isn't that level of trust. There's a sense of, well, I can work with them, but I know that they're going to take credit for it, or they're going to use that in a way that's not going to help me. They're not actually serving the organization or serving the team, they're serving themselves. And so what it actually ends up doing is it becomes this really negative spiral, and it can create a real toxic environment if you're trying to create a team environment for folks. So I think it becomes more damaging than people realize. And as I said, most people can sniff it out pretty quickly because it is quite obvious when it is happening around you.
And Sarah, do you think there's anything that as organisations we have to consider to, I suppose, make collaboration a positive behaviour as opposed to it getting in, as you quite rightly said? I love your Christmas dinner example, because that's so true. Like, you do think about how you position things with the family, and it's not, so we kind of all naturally, instinctively do a bit of that, don't we? So how can we sort of facilitate it in a really positive way, I guess? So there are things that we need to consider.
Well, I think, there are things that can be done. I think, leading by example is a really good start always, I think. Having really clear values and behaviours and recognising good behaviours. I think what businesses, I've noticed, I've worked for some that are much better and some that are less good at this, but businesses tend to reward, recognise, remunerate individuals based on performance, physical outputs, not so much necessarily on how they conduct themselves, the way they network, the values and behaviours that they demonstrate. And I think in leadership, those two things have to be 50-50. They have to be equally recognised and rewarded. And so I think feedback, I think having really good infrastructures and having sort of shared values and behaviours, but allowing people to bring their very true, authentic self to work and find a style that works for them, that fits within those kind of behaviours and value boundaries is important. And I think calling out our behaviours, just dealing with them, really being really kind of head on and front on with it. But one of the other things that I certainly have learned in my time, having done a few different roles, is also creating an environment when somebody joins a team, joins an organisation, where they can just really share a bit about themselves. So, I know my style, I know how you'll get the best out of me, and I know how I tend to react or behave. And I like to just be really open about that when I have a new team or I join a new team. You know, this is me, this is how I am. You know, you can expect this from me, but you know, if that doesn't work for you, you let me know. What's your style? How do we find a way to work well together? And I think creating an environment where people have that very upfront conversation. You know, I'm full of ideas, I will jump to conclusions. You know, that's just my style. If that doesn't work for you, you just need to tell me, or just be aware that that's kind of how my mind works. And therefore, you know, you've kind of started a good, open, authentic relationship, which just enables better ways of working, I think.
Absolutely. So that is psychological contract, isn't it, really? And getting that established up front, I guess. Lee, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, you just, Sarah, something you said just prompted me to remember when I first went into a leadership position years ago, the organisation I worked at the time, I remember my manager saying to me, so now in this position, we're not going to review your performance on the basis of the sales you make or the happiness of your clients. It's going to be on what your team do and critically your peers. So, you know, if the individuals leading the equivalent parts of the organisation aren't growing, you know, that's to you as well. And it was just I've taken that with me through my whole career, that, you know, it's actually, it doesn't matter if I've done really well, you know, that's not going to mean anything. It's the exponential impact that you can have. So as you were saying, Simonne, actually, you know, when you are overly political, it's just damaging in so many ways, isn't it? That's what I was going to say, Steph.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, both of you. I mean, I guess in summary, what I've heard is there's definitely been some benefits to the last year. We can see that in terms of relationship navigation. As Sarah said, you know, just getting to know maybe some of those quieter people that perhaps it's easier to have those conversations with. And also, while we've all been virtual for most organisations, there's been a level playing field, which has been really neat. And, you can get someone else on video at the same time as each other. And then sort of thinking about that transition back. And what I heard is it's really important to ask people and to say to people, how do you want this to work? And remembering it's not just Office 2.0, it's the fact that we could work from anywhere we like and still get our jobs done. And what does that look like in terms of the way we lead and manage individuals as well? So I'm just going to come to each of you just for a few final thoughts. So Simonne, a final thought from you on today's topic.
Yeah, I think the one last thing, we talked a little bit about collaboration, and the one sort of health warning I will say is it's a slippery slope that collaboration can quickly feel like consensus driven. And so it is around making sure you have clear ownership and who has the decision rights. They have the ability to collaborate, get the information from other people, but they unilaterally own the decision and are accountable. And that's the easiest way that you don't easily slip into this consensus. Takes too long, everybody's got to be happy with the decision. That does not move businesses forward. So that's the only thing I would say to keep in mind as you move towards more of a collaborative environment is don't go down that slippery slope to being consensus driven.
Great. And Sarah, what was your final thoughts?
Well, I think on the whole topic, it's be authentic and think about strategic leadership rather than political leadership. Those would be my overarching on that. And I think to Simonne's point, you know, when looking at kind of how might you structure your workplace or your workforce in the future, it's understanding what does the business need first, and then within the boundaries of what's possible, engaging the population to say within this framework, what then is going to work best for you. So it's kind of the environment where it's right for the business and therefore also right for the people.
Absolutely. And Celine, anything to add from you?
Just that I think the real kind of stark takeaway for me is the risk that we're all at of seeing back-to-back meetings as being the equivalent of meaningful social interactions. And actually we know that as humans we need more than that structured communication with people that we work with. So it's how do we create the informal interactions which we know are key for social capital?
Brilliant. So We'll be back in 2 weeks' time, right, Celine?
Yeah, 26th of May, absolutely. 2 more guests talking about change facilitation and navigating change and being agile. Another fascinating topic. Looking forward to it. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for a great session.
Thank you.